Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. So this is the audio-visual recording for Unit 1, Lesson 7. This lesson is definitely different than any other lesson you've completed so far for world cultures in that we're basically going to be looking at culture today, or what some people might call contemporary times or contemporary culture, by looking at how our culture has changed in the last year due to a variety of different reasons. So in order for us to do that, we're going to be completing two parts here. First is the reading questions from an interesting article entitled Coronavirus Will Change the World Permanently and Here's How. So we're going to ask you to fill in the chart with general descriptors for what the paragraphs say, and then of course the time capsule. So if you want to know how to complete the time capsule, just please listen to the other presentation and you can get started on that. Please be advised that you're going to be completing part 1 on this doc, and then the time capsule will be completed on a separate Google Slides presentation. So if you could please open up your Google Doc to part 1 of lesson 7. We're going to give you a brief overview of how coronavirus has changed our culture so far today, in many ways more than what we even realize it right now. So let's go and get started. Here are the top 10 ways that coronavirus has changed our culture. The personal becoming dangerous. So on 9/11, Americans discovered that we're vulnerable to calamities we thought only happened in distant lands, but the 2008 financial crisis told us that we can also suffer the calamities of past eras, like the economic meltdown of the Great Depression. Now, the 1918 flu pandemic is sudden specter in our lives. This loss of innocence or complacency is a new way of being in the world that we can expect to change our doing in the world. We know now that touching things, being with other people, and breathing in the air in an enclosed space can be risky. How quickly that awareness recedes will be different for different people, but it can never vanish completely for anyone who lived through this year. It could become second nature to recoil from shaking hands or touching our faces, and we might all find that we can't stop washing our hands. The comfort of being in the presence of others might be replaced by greater comfort with absence, especially with those we don't know intimately. Instead of asking, is there a reason to do this online, we'll be asking, is there any good reason to do this in person? And might need to be reminded and convinced that there is. Unfortunately, it is unintendedly those without easy access to broadband will be further disadvantaged. The paradox of online communication will be ratcheted up, and it creates more distance, yes, but also more connection. As we communicate more often with people who are physically farther and farther away, and who feel safer to us because of that distance. So basically, think about what the author of that point of view just said, and type your own description of this particular cultural change right here. And you're just going to be doing that for each of the new sections here that we speak of. Next is a new kind of patriotism. So America has long equated patriotism with the armed forces, but you can't shoot a virus. Those are the front lines against coronavirus aren't conscripts, mercenaries, or enlisted men. There are doctors, nurses, pharmacists, teachers, caregivers, store clerks, utility workers, small business owners, and employees. Like Li Wenyang and the doctors of Wuhan, many are suddenly saddened with unfathomable tasks, compounded by an increased risk of contamination and death they never signed up for. When all is said and done, perhaps we will recognize their sacrifice as true patriotism, saluting our doctors and nurses, and genuflecting and saying, thank you for your service, and we now do for military veterans. We will give them guaranteed health benefits and corporate discounts and build statues and have holidays for this new class of people who sacrifice their health and live lives for people. Perhaps, too, we will finally start understanding patriotism more as cultivating the health and life of our community rather than blowing up someone else's community. Maybe the demilitarization of American patriotism and love of community will be one of the benefits to come from this whole awful mess. Interesting take right there. Let's go to the last thing here for community, the return to faith in serious experts. So, America for several years has become a fundamentally unserious country. This is the luxury afforded us by peace, affluence, and high levels of consumer technology. We didn't have to think about things that once focused our minds: nuclear war, oil shortages, high unemployment, skyrocketing interest rates, terrorism has receded back to being a kind of national threat to which we dispatch volunteers in our military to the far corners of the desert and advance guard of the homeland. We even elevated a reality TV star to the presidency as a populist attack on bureaucracy and expertise that makes most of the government function on a day-to-day basis. The COVID-19 crisis could change this in two ways. First, it has already forced people back to accepting that expertise matters. It was easy to sneer at experts until a pandemic arrived, and then people wanted to hear from medical professionals like Anthony Fauci. Instead, it may, one might hope, return Americans to a new seriousness, or at least move them back toward the idea that government is a matter for serious people. The colossal failure of the Trump administration, both to keep Americans healthy and slow the pandemic-driven implosion of the economy, might shock the public enough back to insisting on something different from government rather than emotional satisfaction. To be fair, though, here, guys, let's give you the other side of the story. I think that many other people could look at other parts of the community that might have failed them aside from the executive office of the presidency. Keep in mind, it takes a community to handle an issue and not just one person. So next here is a healthier digital lifestyle. Let's go into that, and then science turns again. So perhaps we can use our time with our devices to rethink the kinds of community we create through them. In the earliest days of our coronavirus social distancing, we have seen inspirational first examples. Cello master Yo-Yo Ma posts a daily live concert of a song that sustains him. Broadway diva Lara Benatti invites performers from high school musicals who are not going to put on those shows to send their performances to her. She'll be watching. Lin-Manuel Miranda joins the campaign and promises to watch as well. Entrepreneurs offer time to listen to pitches, master yoga instructors teach free classes, and this is a different life on the screen from disappearing the video game or polishing one's avatar. This is breaking open a medium with human generosity and empathy. This is looking within and asking, what can I authentically offer? I have a life, a history, what do people need? If moving forward, we apply our most human instincts to our devices, that we will have been a powerful COVID-19 legacy, not only alone together, but together alone. Okay, let's go ahead to Science Reigns Again for technology. Science reigns again. Truth and its most popular emissary, science, have been declining in credibility for more than a generation. As Obi-Wan Kenobi told us in Return of the Jedi, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on one's point of view. In 2005, long before Donald Trump, Stephen Colbert coined the term truthiness to describe the increasingly fact-like political discourse. The oil and gas industry has been waging a decades-long war against truth and science, following up on the same effort waged by the tobacco industry. Altogether, this led to the situation in which the Republicans can claim that the reports about the coronavirus weren't science at all, but mere politics, and this sounded reasonable to millions of people. Quickly, however, Americans are being reacquainted with scientific concepts like germ theory and exponential growth. Unlike with tobacco use of climate change, science doubters will be able to see the impacts of the coronavirus immediately. At least for the next 35 years, I think we can expect that the public respect for expertise in public health and epidemics to be at least partially restored. Big government makes a comeback. So let's talk about the way that government has changed thanks to the coronavirus. And once again, this is also as controversial as anything, but let's keep progressing. The battle against the coronavirus already has made government, federal, state, and local, far more visible to Americans than it normally has been. As we tune into daily briefings from the public health officials, listen to guidance from our governors, and seek to help and hope from national leaders, we are seeing the critical role that big government plays in our lives and health. We also see the deadly consequences of 4 decades of disinvestment in public infrastructure and dismissal of public expertise. Not only will America need a massive dose of big government to get out of this crisis, as Washington's swift passage of giant economic bailout package reflects, but we will need big and wise government more than ever in its aftermath. Next is revised trust in institutions. The coronavirus pandemic, our hopes, will jolt Americans into the realization that institutions and values Donald Trump has spent his presidency assailing are essential to the functioning of democracy and to its ability to grapple effectively with the national crisis. A recognition that government institutions, including those entrusted in protecting our health, preserving our liberties, and overseeing our national security, need to be staffed with experts, not political loyalists, that decisions need to be made through a reasoned policy process and predicated on evidence-based science and historical and geopolitical knowledge. Down here after the parentheses, instead of Trump's America First foreign policy, we need to return to multicultural diplomacy and to the misunderstanding that cooperation with allies and adversaries too is especially necessary when it comes to dealing with global problems like climate change and viral pandemics. Most of all, we need to remember that public trust is crucial to governance, and that trust depends on telling the truth. As the historian John M. Barry wrote in 2004 book The Great Influenza, a harrowing chronicle of the 1918 flu pandemic, which killed an estimated 50 million people worldwide, the main lesson from that catastrophe is that those in authority must retain the public's trust, and that way to do is to distort nothing, to put the best face on nothing and try to manipulate no one. Many people are also saying that there's going to be a political uprising here to the coronavirus. Is that true? Let's find out now. The aftermath of the coronavirus is likely to include a new political uprising on Occupy Wall Street 2.0, if you will, but this time much more massive and angrier. Once the health emergency is over, we will see the extent to which rich, well-connected, and well-resourced communities will have been taken care of, while contingent, poor, and stigmatized communities will have been thoroughly destroyed. Moreover, we will see how political action is possible. Multi-trillion-dollar bailouts and projects can be mobilized quickly, but only if the cause is considered urgent. This mismatch of long-disregarded populations finally getting the message that their needs are not only critically unattended, but also chronically dismissed as politically required will likely have drastic pitchfork consequences. Let's go to the last 2 things here, guys, which talk about the way our lifestyles will change due to the coronavirus. And you might, of course, experience some of these lifestyle cultural changes too. So, For the past few years, Americans have spent more money on food prepared outside the home than buying and making their meals. But now, with restaurants mostly closed and isolation increasing, many people learn to relearn how to cook over the next few weeks. Maybe they will fall back in love with cooking, although I won't hold my breath, or perhaps delivery will triumph over everything else. Sit-down restaurants also could close temporarily as people frequent them less. It is likely that there will be many fewer sit-down restaurants in Europe and the United States. We will be less communal, at least for a while. And then last but certainly not least, a change in our understanding of change. Coronavirus is bringing a paradigm shift, which is among the most overused phrases in journalism. Yet the coronavirus pandemic may be one case where it applies. American society is familiar with a specific model of change operating within the existing parameters of our liberal democratic institutions, mostly free market and society expressive individualism. But the coronavirus doesn't just attack the immune system like the Civil War, Great Depression, and World War II. It has the potential to infect the foundations of a free society. State and local governments are moving at varying and sometimes contrary speeds to address a crisis of profound dimensions. The global economy has entered the opening stages of a recession that has potential to become a depression. Already, large parts of America have shut down entirely. Americans have said goodbye to a society of frivolity and ceaseless activity and flash, and the federal government is taking steps more and more often seen during wartime. Our collective notions of the possible have changed already. The danger the coronavirus poses, both the individual health and the public health capacity persists, we'll be forced to revise our very conception of change. The paradigm will shift, and we will shift with it. So there you have it, guys. These are just some different opinions from different people in the fields of sociology and psychology and social studies who kind of look at cultural trends in a way that makes us think about our own culture. So as you fill out the descriptor boxes for each of these factors and topics, please also then fill out the challenge questions at the bottom. They're just opinion-based questions. I want to know how the coronavirus has impacted you and your culture. Once you're finished, remember you can hit submit because the time capsule is completed on a different part for the Google Classroom post. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you tuning in.